Hey, welcome again. We are still talking about functions. And remember that a function is like a program within a program. When we create a function, then we have this block, and the block is kind of like its own universe. It uses variable names, and it turns out that one function can't really talk to another function. Like everything, all the calculations that a function does are contained within that one function, and as soon as it terminates, all of those calculations, more specifically, all of those variables, are gone. They're wiped clean. You can never get those things back. This is related to what's called scope. And so if we're going to chunk off our code using functions, we have to understand what scope is. And let me bring up my spider here, and I'm just going to start fresh. I'm going to delete all of this silly hello program I was working on, and I'm going to also reset my variable explorer and clear the console. Now I'm going to give you a couple simple examples about scope. We're talking about scope, and what we need to be concerned with is, what do we have? Do we have global scope, or uh, local scope? Okay, these are two terms, local and global, that you need to have in your lexicon. Now, it turns out that functions have local scope, and the main program, like outside of any function, has what's called global scope. And we have to always keep this in mind as we're writing our programs. Now, let me define a function. I'm just going to call this function like spam, and the function is going to do something. It's not going to be very complicated. It's just, how about define a variable called eggs, and eggs is going to be equal to, let's say, 13, something like that. Now, there's my function, and then outside of that function, I'm going to say, I'm going to call the function spam. So my function does not take any inputs, so I don't have to give it any inputs. And then I'm going to ask it to print eggs. Now, let's save it, Control S, and then I'm going to run it. And what you see is that I get an error. Error, eggs is not defined. Okay, eggs is not defined. Well, what do you mean? We defined eggs is equal to 13 here. Yes, but when the program is done executing, or when it terminates, when the function terminates, that is, eggs is gone from all calculations. And so outside of that function, we don't know what eggs is. Eggs is not defined. We didn't return it, and so it's just gone. And what we would say here is that eggs is local in scope. It's local to the function spam. So unless we return the value, we cannot ask for eggs at all. It's undefined outside of that function. And so really what we would say is that local variables cannot be used in global scope. And because remember, we said the main program outside of any functions, right? So lines 6 and 7 here are outside of the functions. The main program is global in scope. All right. Now I'm going to give you a second example. All right, so we'll just kind of come down here. No, actually I'm going to delete what we said here. And I'm going to define a new function. We'll call it spam again. And we're going to say eggs is equal to something like 13. And then we're going to call another function. And we're going to call bacon. And then we're going to print eggs. And that's going to be the end of our spam function. And so now we have to define the bacon function. So define bacon. right? And so we define bacon, and we're going to say, what does this function do? Well, it defines another variable. Let's say ham is 10, and maybe it defines eggs. Eggs is 0. All right, so there are our two functions, and we are going to call spam. Now, so the function call to spam is the main program, right? It's outside of the indentations. So what's going to happen here is we make a call to spam, and then what does the spam function do? Spam defines eggs as 13, then it calls the bacon function. And so bacon defines ham as 10 and eggs as 0. Okay, so that exits, and then it comes back to print the value of eggs in the spam function. So the question here now, this is the crux of the matter, is what value is it going to print there? Is it going to print eggs as 13 or is it going to print eggs as 0? You have to remember that this is local to the function. All of the variables defined within spam are local to spam, and all of the variables defined in bacon are local to the function bacon. So when spam prints the value of eggs, it's going to print the only value that it sees, and the value that it sees is 13. Because bacon, the function bacon, is not returning the value of eggs, once it terminates, these values, ham and eggs, are gone, nowhere to be seen. And so the only thing that spam sees, the function spam sees, is this value of 13. So let's check that out. Let me clear the console, and I'll run this function. And you see it printed the value 13, not 0. And so the point here is that local scopes cannot use variables in other local scopes, right? Eggs equals 0 is local to bacon, and eggs equals 13 is local to spam. Now I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to give you another example of scope. Let's define a function spam, and what we're going to do is we're going to print eggs. So that's kind of weird because we're not sending eggs to the function, right? It's not an input. But outside of the function, we're going to define eggs equals 42, let's say. And then we're going to call spam, and we're going to have it print eggs. Now you might ask, well, think about what this function is going to do, and what's going to happen here. We're not sending eggs as an input to spam, so spam really does not have anything inside it, any variables inside it, but we're asking it to print the variable eggs. But remember that eggs, as we have it here, this exists globally, global, because it's in the main program. Right? It's outside of any function. So eggs exists globally. All right, I'm going to save it, Control S. I'm going to clear the console, and then I'm going to run it. So this prints just fine. Because eggs exists globally, when spam gets called on line 7, it has no problem printing eggs because it can see eggs. Eggs exists for everything. Then, so it prints eggs, it prints 42, then it exits the function, and then our main function, or excuse me, our main program prints eggs again, right? So it prints 42 again. And so the takeaway here is that global variables can be read from a local scope. And if you think about the words local and global, this should make sense. It gives you some sort of intuition behind how these things work if you remember that the main program exists globally. All right, so I'm going to clear that, and I'm going to delete what we've done, start fresh. And remember, we're asking ourselves, well, are these variables global or local? Remember, the functions are local in scope and the main program is global in scope. So I'm going to give you another example now. We're going to define spam. So we're defining a new function. We're going to say eggs equals maybe some string, and we'll say this is the spam function. Okay, and then we're going to print eggs. And then let's write another function, bacon. And we'll say eggs equals, so we're going to use the same variable name, and we're going to say this is the bacon function. Having trouble saying the word function today. Bacon function. And then we're going to call, inside that, we're going to actually call the spam function, and then we're going to print eggs again. Or, yeah, before we call, let's print eggs. There we go. And then in our, this is like a maze, you know, and then in our main function, we're going to say this is the main, I said function, this is the main program. And then we're going to call bacon. And then we're going to print eggs. Now, if you have this understood, and if you can, let me back up. If you can predict what's going to be printed to the console, then you have a good handle of global and local scope. So pause the video if you want to think about it. Please do. Alright, this is what's going to happen. Remember that our functions do not execute until they are called. So line 12 is going to be executed first. Eggs will equal, this is the main program. Then we call bacon. So we come up here to bacon, and bacon, inside bacon, eggs is defined as this is the bacon function. And so that's what it's going to see. We're kind of like overwriting, because it also sees the global eggs, right? But we're overwriting it, and it's going to print this is the bacon function. Then it's going to call spam. This is the spam function equals eggs. And so the spam function will print this is the spam function. Then it'll come back to bacon, right, when this terminates, and then the bacon function will print eggs again. But it does not see this is the spam function, because that eggs is local to spam. It still sees its eggs, which is this is the bacon function. So this is local to bacon, right? And so it's going to print this is the bacon function. And then that terminates, and then the main program will print this is the main program. I'm going to Control S, and I'm going to run that. And there you have it. I'll say this again, so now we can see the output, so maybe we can follow along a little bit better. Eggs is defined as this is the main program, but then we call bacon. Bacon, inside its little universe, overwrites eggs inside its universe as this is the main program. It overwrites it to this is the bacon function, and so it prints eggs. It prints this is the bacon function, because in its universe that's what eggs is equal to. But then it calls spam. All right, so we come up here to spam. In spam's universe, eggs is defined as this is the spam function. So when it prints eggs, it prints this is the spam function. That's this line here. Spam terminates, and the bacon function was not done. The bacon function prints eggs. So what is eggs equal to? It does not see the spam universe, so it still sees eggs is this is the bacon function. So it prints, again, this is the bacon function, then bacon terminates, and we come back to the main program, and then the main program prints eggs, and in the main program, eggs is equal to, this is the main program, and that's what we get. So the takeaway here is that local, really, local and global variables can have the same name, right? But because, I guess, because they exist in their own universes, those names do not talk to one another, and that's what you want. You want to be able to, compartmentalize your code like this. All right, so that's all we have to say for scope, and we'll have a little bit more to say about functions coming up next. Thank you.